have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Neptune Hammer, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Greetings and welcome back to another incredible episode of Dr. J Radio Live, bringing back with you one of our top favorite guests out of all the politicians, celebrities, researchers in all fields. This is really one of the top researchers in ufology, specifically in alien abductions. I have paid attention to his work for a long time. I even dreamt of going to Temple University. That's one hint right there already, in case you haven't already checked out social media, just to attend his courses, even though I had already received degrees. But nonetheless, I am very happy to have been known him, and I'm happy to call him my friend. Now, let me just give an update. Of course, we have Johnny Webb, our London co-host, who is out in the States touring them, who's actually bouncing back to his London studio to join in the show. So hopefully he'll get on before we go throughout, before the end of the show. Nonetheless, now let's introduce everybody. As you know already, I'm broadcasting from the City of Angels right after 7 p.m. Pacific time, where my guest is and my sound engineer. It is 10 p.m., 10:02 actually Eastern time, and of course London, Greenwich time, 3 a.m. And if anywhere else around the world of all the 42 countries and counting where you have submitted questions or calls and comments, figure out your time zone using those three. Just Google World Clock, type in the time zones that we give you, and join us, of course. Tonight we're going to be speaking about an event on October 1st, and on top of that, a lifelong research that this gentleman has done, which I believe he should receive every single Lifetime Achievement Award there is out there in this field from every possible source. And if that can't be done, in the meantime, all I could do is continue to promote his work because it is that important. The first book that put him on the map, or the first one that really opened everyone's eyes, it wasn't the very first book, the one that really opened up everyone's eyes, even Timothy Good, when we spoke to him, arranging a visit for both of them. And of course, Timothy Good, you'll hear him shortly, I'd say in about 2 weeks. We had to pre-record him because of the time difference. Nonetheless, he even quoted our guest tonight, and he's very excited to see him, as am I, since he'll be in my relatively hometown of Southern California on October 1st. And we are going to also be talking about his new best-selling hit, which is really eye-opening, Walking Amongst Us. And what does that infer? It infers extraterrestrials walking amongst us humans right now. Not a plan to do so, not like the threat, but they are here now. So, without further ado, let's bring on our guest, and who I am very happy to call my friend, the one and only Dr. David Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, although you didn't give me enough praise. That's the only problem.
Yeah, I know. I just didn't want to keep you holding. And by the way, the last one, I know when you didn't get to finish everything, what we did is before it hit the other networks, we added in what you spoke after to make sure it sounded properly. But you will absolutely always get praise on our end from every social media aspect because you are that valuable. I wish there was a miracle of one of those fountain of life, fountain of youth, to keep you in your 20s for centuries to come until we can annihilate the threat and isolate those that are walking amongst us and figure out why these nubrids are doing what they're doing, except for assimilating with us. So,
well, as the old phrase goes, from your lips to God's ears.
That's right. That is absolutely right. So you're speaking at Zero International, where I happen to be sitting on the board of directors. Takes place in San Pedro, Saturday, October 1st, and you are speaking at 10 a.m., which awkwardly enough would be the first time you're speaking that early, but hey, first time for everything, right? Everything that you do the first time is the first, so might as well get those out of the way in your life. That way we can always figure out if they're good or not for us. So let's give people an insight on what we're going to be talking about, because you were called out to talk about, because Yvonne Smith runs CERO, which is Close Encounters Resource Organization, and also Close Encounters Research Organization. And you could find all the event info at going to cerointernational.com, CERO international.com, as well as checking on our very own drjradiolive.com website. So you were brought out and chosen to be brought out because of the release of your book. The last time you were on, which was 5 or 6 weeks ago to this night, to Thursday, was your 100th interview that you've done since releasing Walking Amongst Us. So what is this, 107, 110? Nonetheless, I hope everybody out there is getting that, as well as the other 3 books that you've written in your life. But I still say between Secret Life and UFOs, I think that was your first one, and then of course The Threat, which to me was my favorite book for a very long time until Walking Amongst Us hit us. That is when I really got excited, and I cannot wait till you do an sort of an update book following 2 of the ladies' cases. Now, I'm only using vague terms so that way they can come straight from you. So for those people who may have missed the last show, even though it is in archives, let's start talking about what you're going to say at the event.
Well, I've given various lectures on the abduction phenomenon, and I'm assuming that most of the people there will know what the abduction phenomenon is. I'm assuming that because they're members of CERO, they have a certain amount of background as opposed to not, but I don't know. However, I will give a talk basically about my findings over the last 15 years, and which has to do primarily with abductees, helping human-looking hybrids to live on Earth, teaching them what things are in a house and how you go to a store and money and all sorts of things like that, things that everybody learns automatically here, but for beings who are raised on a UFO and who come down, let's just say in their late teens, let's just from 17 to on up, let's just say, they have a life primarily on board the UFO, although many of them have come down even as children to look at people's homes. But when it comes to going outside and all that, that's something that they don't normally do. And there's about 10 trillion things that they have to learn that they never learned before. And it's how abductees are helping them do this, and they stay with them for a year or 2 or whatever it is, and then they move on to other abductees, I would assume. They're living in apartments here, usually in from 3 to 4 people in an apartment, or they're singly in an apartment, and it's a little bit it's mundane. It's sort of amazing in its averageness and all that, and yet at the bottom point of it, at its base, it's profoundly frightening.
It really, really is, especially when you look at the evolution of alien abductions, which I know you've been able to trace back from people recalling older men and women who were talking about their grandparents having little friends or little creatures coming into the room, which can date back to the late 1800s, the late 19th century, although it's safe to estimate that they go back even further than that. Now, let me go back to something that I said in the beginning. I used the word nubrid. That is alien hybrid species that is completely indistinguishable from Homo sapien, except for their powers, their abilities, their agenda, and of course making stupid mistakes like going up to a door and staring at the handle and holding a key in their hand wondering what they're doing. Or if you drive by a nubrid or what looks like to be a human sitting in a car and wondering what the heck the steering wheel does and why it doesn't start and drive, etc. But before we get to nubrids, let's go back to who's taking care of them, which would be hybrids. Am I right?
Yes, yeah. When they're on board the UFO, other hybrids take care of them, and there's a whole sort of group of hybrids. Let's put it this way: there's a continuation of hybrids who look very, very alien, all the way up until hybrids look very, very human. The ones who I call early stage hybrids, who look really bizarre, have very thin, straggly hair and big black eyes, but with whites in them, a little tiny nose, but it is in fact a nose, and a little tiny mouth, and it is a mouth. They take care of hybrid babies.
Yes.
Then there's middle stage hybrids who look sort of half and half between the gray aliens and humans, and who have not as thin, straggly hair. There's more hair there. There's more prominence to the whites in the eyes, and there's they have a larger mouth, but it's all still pretty weird. They look very weird anyway, and they take care of older kids. Maybe 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, around that. And then there's hybrids who look more human, and they take care of the older ones. So each one of these is bred, or I might even say created, for that function. That's what they do. That's what they're programmed to do, and that's basically all they do, I think. Whereas the ones who are human-looking, the hybrids, as I call them, the ones who will be moving in, they look very human. They are human. They are human in every conceivable way. They are indistinguishable. The ones who are distinguishable, who maybe have a nose that's too big or too small or whatever it is, or who are too short or too tall or whatever,
or big eyes, right?
Or maybe they have big eyes. Whatever it is, they don't come down here. They're culled from the herd, so to speak. When they so everybody has a job to do, and what I've learned over the years is that there's various types of aliens on board. There's the gray aliens, there's the insect-like ones, and there's the reptilian-like ones. And each one of these, except maybe the insect-like ones, that one I don't know, but each one of them is basically bred to do what is required of them. They can't. What we're looking at is a workforce from beginning to end. Everybody's a worker. They all have jobs to do. They all know what their jobs are, and they do it, and that's it. And there's no discussion about it, or they don't. There's no downtime that we can see. There's nothing except work in the workforce. That includes hybrids, the ones who will be coming down and living in apartments. When they were asked, why are you here, why are you coming down here and all that, they say, that is our job, that is our task, that is the task I have to do. And they don't know why. They don't have enough, it's not necessary for them to know why. The whys are not big in this world, but their job is to come here and live here. but as I've said many times, when you look at the abduction phenomenon, you have to sort of take a step back. And the problem is the three, as I say, the three pillars of the abduction phenomenon. And we've known about this, but nobody ever kind of put it together. Although it's obvious once you say it. Number one, it's global. This is not an American phenomenon. It goes around the world. It is global. Number two, it is intergenerational. If a person is an abductee, their mother or their father was an abductee, or sometimes both their mother and father were abductees. But and the mother and father's mother and father, their grandparents, one of them had to be an abductee, and perhaps the great-grandparents had to be abductees. And it's possible, but with less certainty, that maybe the great-great-grandparents had to be abductees also. But and it becomes very, very difficult to tell. But it had to start somewhere. And it started either late 19th or early 20th century, take your pick, and it's been going sort of full blast ever since then, constantly expanding as the number of abductees expands in the society. Because if a couple has, one of whom is an abductee, has 4 kids, let's just say, or 3 kids or 2 kids, and all the children will be abductees. And when they have kids, later on get married and have kids, 2 non-abductees, for example, all those children will be abductees. So what you get is a phenomenon that goes along with the general increase in population of the Earth over the decades, so that it keeps up with it and expands with it. So you get more and more and more abductees, more and more and more aliens, and what has been I've been tracing in recent years is more and more abductees who are doing hybrids and gray aliens work on board a UFO, processing other abductees, working with abductees, finding other abductees, things like that. And that's, I think that's because of the enormous expansion in the population over the decades. In the early 1940s, there was about 3.2 billion people on Earth, and now there's 7.4 billion people on Earth. So there's an enormous expansion of abductees and of people to be processed, and abductees are helping fill in as a work group on board a UFO. I could never have even imagined anything like that 10 years ago. It was beyond my capabilities to imagine, I think. But in fact, that is what's happening. In fact, I did a session with a woman just a couple of weeks ago who was engaged in that kind of work, learning how to do this to abductees or do that or whatever. And I included a couple of these incidents in the book as well. And it's you have to understand that if there is another planet out there that has intelligent life and technology, it has to be extremely advanced compared to our technology, because our technology is brand new. In fact, it is so new, it almost doesn't rise to the occasion of being born. It is so new. Technology experts date it to 250 years, which in cosmic time is no time. It's nothing. It's zero.
That's right.
And even if you date it back to 5,000 years, it's still within the zero range. It's still nothing compared to
cosmic time. This is why Michio Kaku has used, I don't know whose scale it was, to say that we are a type 0 or type O civilization, where a type 1 civilization can traverse all of the solar system, go to other solar systems, and harness the power of its local star, where a type 2 can harness the power of, I guess, more than that, colonize far more than that, where a type 3 would be, say, colonizing or using the black hole of that galaxy. But in essence, like you said, we are literally just a small sliver of time in this huge time that we've had life. And not many people realize this, but recently, even Seth Shostak, a very old school person who won't even admit to UFOs being real, or that there's so many very, very credible people talking about being taken, such as Captain Michael Sala, Captain Robert Sala, when after the Maelstrom Air Force Base in 1967, he and his wife were both taken in 1985. That is a person that does not exaggerate, and he only tells what he knows. So of the abduction, he doesn't speculate. And this leads into two questions first. The first thing I want to say is hypnosis, the dangers of hypnosis. If people don't hypnotize abductees properly, they could implant suggestive of realities that didn't exist. So you have to ask the proper broad questions to let the information come to you. Isn't that right?
Yeah, hypnosis itself is, as scientists have found, 1/1000th of a centimeter away from being totally fraudulent altogether. It's just simple words that the person, if the person wants to relax and wants to go into this state, they will, and if they don't, they won't. The words will not have any effect on, for example, sometimes people will bring their friends to my office here, and I have this is a home office, and I have a day bed that they can lay on, and there's a chair where their friend can sit on, and I'll do this induction, which takes about 15 minutes, and the person lying on the day bed there sort of is hypnotized, they're in a trance and all that. Their friend is sitting there listening to every word and nothing. You know, they're just wondering when it's going to be over. It's so boring already. I mean, it's just, if you want to be hypnotized, you will. If you don't want to be, it's really an interaction between the person who's being hypnotized and the hypnotist. And if one of those things doesn't work, then it's not, the deal's off. So the key thing here, though, is asking the questions in the right way, in the right order, and saying the right thing. First of all, every person who does abduction hypnosis has to a certain extent, has to be very careful about how they deal with their subject. I'm not going to say their patient or anything like that, but and you have to say the right things. If they're really frightened, if they're really scared, if you know, these events can be profoundly meaningful. It changes people's lives when they learn about it, and in a way you become sort of a lay therapist. You have to say the right things right then and there. And and you have to be cool about it, and you have to calm them down if they're excited and all the rest of that stuff. And that sort of goes with the territory. It's not just hypnosis. It's also what you're doing is you're taking their lives in your hands in a sense, and you're transforming it into something that they suspected already. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. But once the reality begins to come through, the only person that they're going to have to talk to about this is going to be you first and foremost, not even their spouses, because there have been problems with spouses, who think that their husband or their wife is crazy, and then they get divorced, and at the proceedings for the divorce, they say, my wife or my husband thinks that he or she is being kidnapped by aliens from another planet. I want the kids.
That's right. We do have a question already coming in from the chat room. As you know, we have several chat rooms, international and domestic, but the official chat room for our website is run by SoCal Dan, who goes by Twitter at DonDanL, as well as his real name is Dan Hoquist for his recent book that he just released. Anyway, Dan, ask the question. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Jacobs.
Hi.
This is a question from Grand Prairie, Texas, from a Debbie Coffee, and she says this all implies governmental assistance. How long do you think that the key players have been aware of this?
I don't see any evidence myself for the government knowing about this or being concerned with it or caring about it or hiding anything about it. The government is absolutely unable to affect this phenomenon. The technology is just too high. There's, it's like a tribe sitting around and saying that they've seen people. Well, the way they put it might be different, but driving around in Jeeps or something like that with these long sort of sticks sitting on the front of the Jeep, and we'll have to stop them in some way. And you know that the technology is just not going to happen. It just isn't there. They're doomed. Now, I don't know if we're doomed or anything like that, but the fact is that we are dealing with a very, 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 very advanced technology compared to what we have now. And therefore, even if the government did know about it, there would be absolutely no way that they could stop it. Now, I'm saying that off the top of my head, and maybe they have, and the problem here is that this subject is toxic. UFO abductions is toxic to the scientific community, to the academic community, and they would be the ones who would be working on this subject, trying to figure out how to stop it in some way, how to slow it down, whatever it is. And there's absolutely no information about that at all from any country in the world. This is not an American phenomenon. If we know it, other ones are going to know it too. See what I mean? We have to consider the global aspect of this, and when you take a look at what's happening throughout Europe, all of which there's thousands and millions of abductees around there, or whatever it is, we don't ever hear anything from any of the governments about not just abductions, which are totally insane, but UFOs, just the UFO phenomenon, which has been around for a very long time now, and there's now, having said that, the French have a small, tiny little group that's under French government auspices who study UFOs, and they don't have the outreach, nor do they have the wherewithal to understand fully from what I can tell, the importance of the subject. In Chile, the Chilean government cooperates with a UFO organization there, but it's still primarily looking at UFOs. Now, here's the problem. If they're looking at UFOs, and that's where the thrust of their interest is, you know immediately that they have no idea what's going on. They don't know anything about abduction phenomena. They don't know anything about the intent of the people inside the UFOs, because when you're looking at the outside shells of objects, and even getting accounts of little gray men standing around in a landed UFO or being seen through a window of a UFO, all that sort of stuff, you can only learn so much. None of it relates to the most important thing to know, and that is the matter of intent. Who are these people? What do they want? What are they going to do with us? Why are they here? There's nothing to do with those kinds of questions. It all has to do with, are UFOs real? Which is just sort of nutty, considering that the UFO phenomenon we knew every conceivable thing you could know about UFOs by the late 1970s, which was a long time ago by my calculations. And since that time, we have learned nothing about UFOs outside of the abduction phenomenon. We've learned nothing about the outside shells of those objects. Books are written about their maneuvers. They were written about their color changes. They were written about how long they were seen, them flying away at tremendous speeds, and on and on and on and on and on. And after that, people sort of, you don't get a whole lot of UFO research. You do still, but it just sort of recapitulates what we already know. There's not a whole we can learn. So it's the inside that's the most important thing, and that's where the abduction phenomenon comes in. And I can count on one hand all the abduction researchers in the country, practically.
Let me ask you this question. First of all, actually, let's explain to the listeners and the people who will be viewing this on YouTube, in MP4 now, aside from the people who are listening to it on MP3 on all the networks, terrestrial radio, iTunes, TuneIn.com, and every avenue you can find. But nonetheless, the history of abductions. We know, let's just take Betty and Barney Hill, for instance. When they were taken, they described these beings as looking completely different from us. Small bodies, larger heads, larger eyes, and they extracted Barney's sperm and Betty's ova, which gives us the inclination, the only inclination is that they were trying to splice DNA and create their own Homo sapiens under their circumstances, such as on board ships inside tubes, which is why you hear so many women who say they haven't participated in any sort of sex and yet all of a sudden are found to be pregnant, but then sometime in their first trimester, without having a miscarriage, their baby is gone. But nonetheless, we had that. And then of course, as each generation kept going, first you had the extraterrestrials telling the mothers especially to come on, and they see these creepy little babies, but they knew it was their children, so they had to love them. But the extraterrestrials would order them, show us how you love them, show us the emotional parts, as if they don't know, or maybe they lost it in their hundreds of thousands or millions or even 1 billion years being ahead of us, to give them that head start or that far advantage in technology. And then you have humans or extraterrestrials looking more and more like humans in their hybrids. And then of course you have the hybrids, which are completely indistinguishable. So let's go to the evolution of abductions. Why is it that only in the last 20, 30 years or 15, 20 years did they start taking Homo sapiens that were already have been abducted and showing them their hybrid children, which were looking more and more human, and told them to essentially, what do you do with this car? Here's a door. What do you do? Or here's a grocery store scene. What are you supposed to buy? What's money used for? Etc. Etc. I mean, this is pure speculation, and I know you're a very objective researcher, which is why I respect you so much and respect your work so much, because you've only picked up what you've gotten from objective research. You only obviously put all this objective research together and used Occam's razor to determine what the outcome of the hypothesis is, which is essentially a takeover from the inside, rather than coming in like Independence Day and blowing up the Capitol and all these major buildings and having these battles. They're infiltrating us. So can you talk to us about the evolution in the last 50 or so years?
Well, it's a little bit of a tough one. We assume evolution because we're finding out more and more about the phenomenon, and the question is, did we just miss it before, or is everything sort of changing over the years? As a historian, I like to think that things are changing to a certain extent, because historians look for change over time in lots of instances. However, for example, in the first abduction that came to light, so to speak, was the Antonio Villas-Boas case in Brazil in 1957. And that case had a strong reproductive element, to say the least. They took this guy who was 18 years old or 19 years old or whatever he was at the time. He was plowing his father's land a tractor at night because it was too hot in the daytime to do it. And this was about 1 o'clock in the morning, or whatever it was, and down comes the flying saucer, and he is taken on board this UFO, and they do this to him and that to him and this to him and that to him, this to him, that to him, and then they take him into a room, and there's a human-looking female, and she has no clothes on, and as I remember, and he has this he's totally entranced with making love with her. Let's put it that way. It's uncontrollable desire, and so he makes love to her, and then he makes love to her again, and so forth, and he found it repugnant, or repellent, but he couldn't help doing it, and all that. And then at the end, she sort of pointed to her abdomen, and then she pointed up as if they're going to be used for the baby or whatever is going to be used for whatever purposes for them who are up in the skies. So he said he felt like he was being used like a stallion to improve the stallion stock, to improve their stock. That was his sense of it. Now, this guy was not believed at all because he was an illiterate Brazilian peasant. The thing was, though, that the people who said that he was an illiterate Brazilian peasant were slightly amiss. It turns out he was a law student at home on vacation, and he became an attorney, and he maintained the truthfulness of his story all the way to the end, even though that story is completely insane. And if he really was a charlatan of some sort, and once he became a lawyer, he would just laugh that off. That never really happened. It was just a trick or whatever. But no, he maintained the truthfulness of that forever. And so from the very first case that came to public attention, there was this reproductive aspect. Same thing with Barney and Betty, and what most people could not. I mean, there just wasn't enough evidence to understand what was happening. I mean, I remember when I first met Betty in 1975. I asked Betty, well, what were these aliens like? When they had arms, did they have elbows? They bend their arms at their. I was asking the most basic questions imaginable, and she said yes, they have elbows and all that. And and I was already a UFO researcher. I worked for UFO groups and all the rest of this stuff, and I was a consultant to the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and I was heavily, to say the least, into UFOs. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the UFO controversy, and so. But when it came to aliens, I knew absolutely zero. Now we know what's going on in aliens' heads. We know the differences between aliens. It's amazing how much we've learned over the years. So the question is, is it just a matter of finding out, or is there change over time? The answer is, I think there is change over time, because if you remember in the threat, these beings were talking about that soon there was going to be a change. Soon the change was going to happen. Everybody was going to be happy. Everybody would know his place. And the change was coming, and I think I said this to you last time. I said, well, what do they mean by the change? This is in hypnosis testimony and all that. And they said, the person who's an abductee said, well, they didn't know. They didn't know what in other words, they didn't make it up or anything like that. I said, well, do you know what the word soon means? They didn't know that either, because soon is a non-word, especially if you're dealing with aliens. It could be 10,000 years from now or 10 minutes from now, for all we know, So nobody knew that either. But as I kept working at it, I realized that this phenomenon was changing. This was different. Things were happening now that I had not heard at all 20 years ago when I was doing research. I hadn't heard it then, and I hadn't heard it 30 years ago when I was doing research. And so I realized that, yes, there is change over time. There's a goal. This is a goal-directed phenomenon. They're working for that goal. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. and they're getting, I don't know how long the end will be, but they're making progress, and you can see it along what we know and how we knew it over the years, and it does seem to be progressive.
Now, one thing that I'd really like to mention is Timothy Good is extremely excited to meet you, and I will make sure that you guys get in touch before you get there. Obviously, if the emails hasn't been working, but nonetheless, he said that throughout his life, going back to the 80s, especially closer to now, he's had 3 incidents where he had hybrids. He believes hybrids are some sort of extraterrestrials that looked identical to humans in every way, except that they were perfect, meaning there was no there was no scars, no acne, nothing like that. They were dressed professionally. They just looked almost too perfect. So one of the cases that he said, he was in New York, I believe it was after he's a violinist as well, and he had done an orchestra, and so after that he was somewhere, and he said he noticed somebody walking in that was awkward but looked too perfect to be a human. Every human is flawed in some way, both characterly and how they look. And this person, this man, like I said, perfect hair, perfect eyes, perfect skin, nice clothing and everything. And what he did is he tried to send him a thought, said, if you are what I think you are, come sit next to me. And the being did. And then he said, touch your right nose with your left, or with your right hand. And the being did, and that sort of confirmed it for him. So I would think that if he's experienced that, I wonder how many other people have accidentally run into this that are aware enough to pay attention. Do you know of any other cases?
You know, I don't. Generally speaking, people call me and they tell me their roommate's a hybrid. Well, generally speaking, they wouldn't have a hybrid would not be rooming with a non-hybrid, and so that the chances of that happening are extremely remote. And people call me up and they tell me that they think they're hybrids, and that's not possible. I wouldn't do that. It's just this is an extremely well thought out program. The amount of effort and intelligence that has gone into this program is simply beyond my ability to understand. It's amazingly well produced, so to speak. In general, hybrids don't know the word hybrid. That word was invented by Bud Hopkins.
That's right.
For this phenomenon, as my colleague Bud Hopkins back in the 1980s, and but they wouldn't know that. They wouldn't know that word. All they know is that their task is to live here, and to be one of us. Now there is an ever so slight, hardly noticeable difference between them and us, which we forgot to say, and that is, neurologically, they can control us totally and completely, and we cannot control them. They can make us do anything they want, see anything that they want us to see, think anything that they want us to think. They have complete control neurologically over any human. Without that neurological control, there would be no abduction phenomenon. You'd have to tie down people, lasso them, bring them up into a UFO or whatever, and they'd be screaming and carrying on and kicking and never be able to stop them. And they couldn't do the abduction phenomenon without that neurological control. For all the aliens on board, that neurological control is retained by the hybrids, as I call them, the hybrids who are human living here. And so if there's a thought in somebody's mind that, well, this person is a hybrid, they would then immediately think, no, he's not a hybrid. He's just a really good person. Oh, I really like him. I'll never think about that again, ever. That's that's just a slight difference, you see.
Yes, absolutely. Now, let's make a clear distinction between the few people that have total conscious recall of them being taken, such as Jim Sparks, who have never undergone hypnosis. I know a great friend who's also a radio host that I used to work with about 5 years ago, maybe closer to 6. His name is David Dunger. I don't know if you've ever spoken to him. And
Don't know.
he's a very well family man. You could tell he's intelligent. He's just not one of those people that's making stories up. And he recounts this tale of being on a mainstream, a major airline's flight going back to Australia, with approximately 200 plus people on board. And what happened? He recalled what he thought he saw the stewardess standing in the middle, near to the front where the first class would be, since this wasn't a Boeing 747 where first class is above, and she was staring directly at him. And then all of a sudden he realized, by looking at this being's face, it didn't look human. And then next thing he knows, he does not recall a thing for about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, until they're back in flight. Now, I'd love to see the radar evidence to see what happened, because there was the whole plane taken at the same time and just dropped back in the air in the same altitude, because there's several cases of these objects taking planes and jumping them forward to where someone say they calculate the fuel and they need 4 hours to get there, and next thing they know is they arrive there within an hour after seeing some sort of an anomalous object flying around them, and they land with 3/4 of their fuel. Things like that couldn't happen even if you had the best hurricane winds pushing you in that direction. But nonetheless, what do you think is the difference between people who have their subconscious hiding the subject versus people who are talking about this openly, or have to go through? Okay, so if their subconscious is hiding it, that's why people use hypnosis to sort of get that out, because a lot of times your conscious fear will bury it into your subconscious so it's out of your memory, because your experience might have been so bad. But then there's those few people that literally, I guess, like Jim Sparks, as he says, he fought tooth and nail against these beings to make sure that they wouldn't take him until he finally accepted that he was being taken, after seeing evidence where he saw a glass sliding door he had, and he woke up after having a nightmare with these beings on his ship, and he remembers them taking him through the glass sliding door, and he walked through mud in his bare feet because he was in his pajamas. But when he came back home and finally woke up, not only did he see mud on his feet and on his bed and on his bedroom floor, he saw a footprint where half of the foot was inside the glass in the house, the other half, which was the heel, this was probably during the process when they were returning him, his foot was, the heel was outside. And that couldn't be done because what are you going to do if it's closed? If you were asleep and it's closed and nobody was there was no burglar there, and it's your feet, it's your footprint. I just think that's one of the most bizarre cases. So what do you know about those people that are able to have this conscious recall?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that maybe 95% of all abductees do not have any conscious recall at all. They know they've led odd lives and odd things have happened to them, but they don't chalk it up to the abduction phenomenon necessarily. So I see, and any other researcher sees, people who know, who think, who suggest maybe that they might be an abductee because they put these odd things together, and their dreams of aliens and dreams of being out of their room or out of their car or whatever it is, that sort of stuff that seemed more than just realistic, and these things keep happening to them, and they are the ones who contact researchers. So the ones who don't know, I'm not in the life ruining business, so I'm not picking people who just lead a normal life and all that, and even though they're abductees. So, but even then, you have to remember, and here's something that people are going to hate me forever about. And I'm just going to make it into a blanket statement, knowing that all blanket statements are wrong. And that is, consciously recalled memories of abductions are almost always incorrect. Not that they weren't abducted, they were, but what they remember is usually only bits and pieces that have been put together along with dream material and imagination and popular culture put together into a narrative that they tell you. And I've had so many people tell me about what's happened to them in their abductions, and when we start finding out exactly what did happen, it's always something that is unexpected. It didn't turn out to be the way they thought it was. The way they remembered it was not the way it was, etc. So you have to be very careful of conscious memories. It's a tough one. I learned that the hard way, and but I did learn that in the very first session I ever had. It was the gift, capital G, that was given to me, where this woman said that she was, as I remember, she was abducted from her home, and she was taken. I strike this. She was 6 years old, and she was playing in a field with another friend, and they took her on board this object and lifted her up, and she went up with a guy who had a page boy haircut, which, of course, in my very first session, I didn't even know what a page boy haircut was. I had to look it up on Google, and it was and then they put her on this guy who she called Cosmo, with the page boy haircut. She already knew his name, she said. Put her on a table, took her clothes off, did a whole examination of her, including a reproductive examination, which was extremely difficult for her to talk about. It was embarrassing. Then took her down a hallway where she met a gray alien, and she was required to put her hands on the gray alien's head, and she felt love and warmth emanating from him, and then when she took her hands off, it was gone. They walked into another room at the end of a corridor, and there was a council of aliens sitting around a table-like thing, and they said that when she grew up, she was going to be intelligent and beautiful and wonderful and have a great life and all that. And then he took her into the room, and he got her just again and back to where she was in a park. And I thought, oh my God, I've done it. I've done hypnosis with an abductee. That's unbelievable. It's amazing. It's astounding. It's, oh my God. And I went upstairs that night to transpose everything on this tape recorder to, this is 1986, to
30 years ago.
Yep. To my computer, which was operating on without DOS. I'm sorry, with DOS, but without Windows. Yes. So, however, in my stupidity, I thought that the little tiny tape recorder I had would pick up every word she whispered. And there was absolutely none of her testimony on that tape at all. It only picked up my questions and no answers.
Ouch. So all you have is your memory to...
I broke into a cold sweat, and I said, I'll remember this, and I'll write it all up. I spent about the first 5 minutes trying to remember a sentence, and it's just not going to happen. So, but she came back for another session. A couple of months later, I asked her, remember that first session we did? And I said, well, I had a little trouble with the tape recorder, and I must say I did feel like a damned fool. But I said, can we do that one again? She said, sure. So she's in this park, and she's lifted up by this guy who's got a page boy haircut, and she's got a name for him named Cosmo, and he takes her into this room, and she takes her clothes off, and he puts her on a table, and he does this, that. She's very embarrassed to talk about the one of the parts of the examination or whatever, and then he puts her clothes back on, and he takes her back. I said, Melissa, remember that first session we did? You talked about how you were taken down a hallway, you met this gray alien, and you had to put your hands on his head and all that? And she said, I don't think that happened. I don't remember that happening. I said, well, what about when you went into this room and there was a council set up and they said you were going to grow up to be wonderful and all? She said, I think that happened to my friend Lydia, not to me.
Well, it's a shame that you were not able to pick that up, but obviously that's always a learning lesson. It's a gift.
It was a gift, yes, and I realized right away that I had to put controls into place. This was not going to happen to me again, and I knew I got stung with confabulation right away.
Now, I have a question here coming in from chat. This goes back a little bit ago, but it was actually asked only 7 minutes ago. But it goes back to something we were talking about earlier. Obviously, we're almost at the end of the hour, but we have to keep you on much longer. So if you need a break, just let us know so we can queue up the break. But nonetheless, let me ask this. This is from Shannon. I believe the last name is either Drossler or Drossler. Madison, Wisconsin. Why is hypnosis accepted as legitimate by American courts?
Most American courts do not accept hypnotic testimony. Some do, most don't. The thing about hypnosis is if done properly with a proper person, it can work. It does work. We don't exactly know the mechanisms for why it works, but it does work. Now, when people come in to lose weight or something like that to professional hypnotists, it's not going to happen immediately. They have to be reinforced over and over and over and over and over again. So it's not something like somebody will think that they're, a duck or something, go walk away from the office quacking and never stop or anything like that. So it really has to do with the chemistry between the hypnotist and the person who agrees to it, so to speak.
Now, I do know from law school, one of the major cases we read in criminal law, and following that was criminal procedure, was that hypnosis can be used as a defense. And this woman was under hypnosis and believed to have spiders all over her and was scared and accidentally killed somebody. So that hypnosis defense worked and she was let off scot-free. Mind you, this didn't just end up in trial court. It had to go through appellate court and to the California Supreme Court, if not to the federal court system. I doubt it went up all the way to SCOTUS, which is Supreme Court of the United States. I know you know this, but I'm talking about to the international listeners. But this was a defense established quite some time ago. I just wanted to throw that out there. But you're absolutely right. It's ironic. Same reason why we don't use polygraphs in courts. Because if you use polygraphs in courts, then what's the point of jurors? Really, what is the point of them, Okay, let me ask you about this. I'm going to get the names out of you, although I have it right in front of me, because right in front of me is a beautiful book with an awesome cover with, I think, is the best book I've written. And anybody who knows me, as a host and as a friend, can see my library of books going back over 30 years filled with books on this topic, and they're in 3 different rooms on 4 different bookshelves and every other drawer you can imagine. But walking amongst us is fantastic. Now there's 2 women in particular that you're going to expand on and do either a follow-up or just follow up on their stories of what they had to do with the hybrids. So what are their names for all those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet from the last time you were on till now? And by the way, for everybody out there, you can find all 4 of David Jacobs' books simply by going to our website, clicking on the Books and Videos tab, scroll down to David Jacobs. It'll take you to his author's page on Amazon. And remember, even if a book is out of print, you can always find a used copy. Granted, some of them may be hundreds of dollars, but you can find it nonetheless. So what were those 2 ladies' names?
Now, which ladies were these again that you were asking for?
You're going to do a follow-up book. Betsy is one of them. That's the first hint of the first lady.
Yeah.
And the other one is, I can tell you right now, it's not Lydia. I will tell you shortly. But the point is you said there is so much that you had not had a chance to put in here in this book that you're going to put in a follow-up book that you think they've had so much.
Oh, okay. Oh, this has to do with Betsy and with Betsy's hubrid, and what happened to me as her hybrids and her aliens tried to keep me from. What they tried to do was they tried to keep her from talking to me, which was a whole major event, a series of events. And then when they couldn't do that, they eventually decided that they would get me to stop talking to her. And this led to, let's just say, upset in my family, and and especially in my brain. And I kept expecting them to come in every night, or during the night. And I did, for some reason or other, I just didn't want them coming into my bedroom and staring into my eyes to see what I was thinking.
Neither would I. And neither would anybody in their logical mind.
Right. That's exactly right. So that will be my last book if I have enough gumption to actually write it. Right now, I'm still trying to figure out how to write this cockamamie book on how to do a hypnosis with abductees that I've been working on for a while. And I realize as I read through it that I've already written this part, and I wrote something in Secret Life or The Threat that I'm throwing in there as if nobody had ever read it before. And this is what's called...
It's been read over and over. That's why people, even Timothy Good, when we brought up your name during the interview, immediately he talked about the threats. And I think that's why it's so fantastic, because globally the threat is recognized. You made an outstanding book and woke people up, and following the threat up with Walking Amongst Us is literally going from the threat of what may happen to what is happening. Very big difference.
Yeah, it's a culmination type book. It does sort of talk about what's happening and why and what they're after and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't think that I could ever go there, but after 30 years, and along with change over time and me sort of plugging away at it sort of revealed itself, and I know if I can do it, anybody can do it. So start immediately.
Yes, that's right. You have to. Now, what are some of the most outstanding events that you found out that Betsy had endured in her life and is continuing to endure in her life right now, aside from the fact that the extraterrestrial controllers are trying to prevent you from getting information from her, because that will unveil their plan? And if you unveil the plan, publish it, and get it out there, and the word gets known, people will start to be on the lookout for humans that are generally smart but act very stupid, even though someone with a very low IQ knows when you see a door with a knob, you turn it.
Right, yeah. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. I think that the word best used for hybrids who come down freshly and are not fully assimilated into the society is naivete. They're extreme. They can be, especially when they first get here, extremely naive. However, if you're suspicious of them, they will probably know that, and therefore you will not be suspicious of them, because they have neurological control over people. That's the one difference between them and us, which makes us, as I've often said, which makes us a second-class species and them a first-class species. And that, when I look at history, that just doesn't bode well for us. It's not something you want. You want us to be a first-class species and them to be a second-class species. That's what we all want, not vice versa. So I'm 74 years old, so it's not a worrisome thing to me, but it is for my two sons, and
yes.
They're
grandchildren,
and potential grandchildren, right?
Yes.
So for me, but. I keep thinking about this hypnosis business and being applied in a court of law, and I keep thinking, well, maybe wait a second, maybe it was the lie detector test that's not admissible.
Yeah,
True. But I did read once that some courts will not accept hypnotically driven testimony, and it depends on the court. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
So, obviously, there's so many names of so many different people. Obviously, you hear about Bernard, you hear Eric, there's Paula, Allison. There was one other woman who is important to you. You got so much information out of, as you did with Betsy, that you wanted to do a follow-up. Do you recall her name?
I don't actually, but then again, I don't recall my name either. So I'm looking at the names in my book right now: Paula Richardson and Pam Martin and Karen Morgan. Karen Morgan is a woman who made it into Secret Life, The Threat, and Walking Among Us. She made it into all three of the abduction books that I've written, and she's the only one. I started reading with her in 1987, and I still see her from time to time.
Really? So,
yep.
So are you talking, 29 going on 30 years of someone you've been working with that is continually going through these contacts, and of course would, have to admit to the fact that something is not going properly in her life, that she has to, of course, have this subconscious be unlocked to understand through hypnosis of what is happening to her. Because
she's already had so many sessions with me. Like most people, they just sort of gravitate away. But every once in a while, she'll say something really strange happen, and she'll come over and we'll have a session. And but she's already learned so much about it. What happens is, there's they learn what's happening to them. They come over and over and over and over again. I don't charge any money. They can come as many times as they want, and eventually they're sick of it. They just put it off in the corner of their mind. They don't care anymore. They know they're going to be abducted for the rest of their life, and they just want to get on with whatever life they have and not let this thing interfere with them like it had been before. And when that happens, I feel I've won a victory. That's good. They're beginning to lead a normal life, even though they know that they are abductees, but they're not afraid to go to bed at night. They don't sleep with a gun under their pillow, and things like that. And they're leading a normal life. I know when I get a call, like somebody would be with me up for 20 sessions or something like that, and I get a call saying, David, I can't come to the session tomorrow because my car's in the garage. And but I'll call you up later. We'll make another date. And I know when they say the car's in the garage, I know I'll never have another session with them. I've heard that story a bunch of times. They want to let me down lightly, but it's a victory. They're tired of it. They want to have their normal life that they haven't had for a very, very long time, as they've been obsessing about this thing. And now they're no longer obsessing. They just want to be regular human forever, and that's good. It's good.
Now let's talk about things that you've realized over the last 30 years, which culminated in the threat and now walking amongst us, which is not just the plan anymore, which was laid out in the threat, but now literally happening, which is the assimilation of these hybrids with us Homo sapiens. Now, what did you see of them being malevolent, aside from the fact that they come and go as they please? They take people from their rooms while driving, while flying, without knowing, without permission is the number one key, and doing tests to them against their will, which are all violations, by the way. If anybody had done that and was caught by the police, what would happen? They'd be slapped on cuffs, thrown in a jail, signed a public defender unless they can get a private attorney, and boom, they are stuck into a court of law facing criminal charges for all of the above, for assault, battery, kidnapping, trespass, and multiple obviously other things. And I would think that there have been some abductions that have gone terribly wrong. Is it possible to say that there's assumption that some people who have been abducted and who have been tested with medically have been killed throughout the testing on accident?
This I don't know. I've worked with people who have died, usually of natural causes, cancer, heart disease, or whatever it is. And there's no miracle cures, I'll say that, because that would draw attention to them, and so that's not going to happen. But I haven't seen any overt malevolence. It's just, this is a program that they're doing, and they just do it. The abductee is in their control. Every once in a while, an abductee will snap out of it, so to speak, and not be in their control, and jump off their table, or run out of the room, or both, and run down a hallway. Of course, there's nowhere to go, but they're in a panic. And then these other aliens will eventually get them and bring them under control, and everything is fine. They bring them back and put them back on the table, And but malevolence, I haven't seen that at all in meanness or anything like that, or doing things to abductees that will consciously hurt them. I don't think that's built into their brains. I don't think that part is there. I haven't seen that, but you never know. Now, I personally think that they were, as I said, they were created for the jobs, and the jobs don't call for humor or sadness or anger or things like that. Not extreme anger. There might be irritation, but the ones who are in control are the insect-like ones.
Yes.
They might have a broader range of emotions, hard to tell. They are order givers. Everybody else is an order taker, and we don't know whether they're higher ups above them somewhere else in the universe. That we don't know. We don't know anything about any part of the backstory here.
And that's the key, that we don't know. All we can do is do our best to find out, because it's not like we could arrest them and interrogate them without them breaking free, using their telepathy or telekinesis or telepathy to contact another ship and to pull them out of that situation. The point being is all we can do is to try to do our best in research to get them.
Yeah, that's this is, I don't know what the ending is. I don't know whether it's better to know or not to know about this, to tell you the truth. I have my, there's a strong points, pro and con for both concepts. I've taken the idea that it's better to know in some way for us, obviously. But there's not a whole lot we can do about this. I mean, as I said before, the level of knowledge is much higher and for them than it is for us, especially technological knowledge, and that really puts us in a horrendous bind. We don't know when these insect-like ones go home. Well, we don't even know if they go anywhere, and we don't know if they have a home, but we don't know if they have something like R&R. Rest and relaxation. None of this backstory is known. I can't give you any kind of sense of their lives. Gray aliens are different, in my humble opinion. I think that they're created on board with human DNA for the purpose of being workers, and therefore their jobs, their lives, their everything is on board, and then eventually they're disposed of in some way, and new ones are created. That's my best guess.
And that's all we can do. Like you said, what if their home is nothing but the ships that they have been living on for hundreds or possibly thousands, millennia, years? We just don't know. That's the hard part. That's the scariest part. Now, here's a question that came in from Leanne. That's all it says. Leanne, Kansas City. In order to control us humans, are hybrids possibly placed into high places of leadership?
The answer is no. When they come here, well, the answer is I don't know, but I don't think so, because usually people who are leaders have a background that is checked over and over and over and over again, and they can trace them from their birth and all that. And with hybrids, there is no birth. They come down at age 17. They have to learn things from scratch. One of the oddities that I learned before I started doing abduction research, and was sitting by the side of Bud while he was doing abduction stuff, was that these aliens, and it's sort of unnerving, they have no interest in any social structures in any country in the world. They're not interested in what a president of the United States is, or who he is, or who she is, as the case may be, and they're not interested in the Senate and House of Representatives and state senators, and they're not interested in governors. They have no interest in political organizations. They don't have any interest in any kinds of organizations other than things that they might be useful to them in some way. Like, obviously, a market is an organization in a way, but to me, that means that lack of interest means that in the future we will be living under them.
Under their control. Exactly.
Under their control, not, yeah, right. Our institutions don't mean anything.
So essentially you sort of answered Leanne's follow-up question, which was, what is your opinion of their end game? That was it.
Well, as I say in the book, and once you read it, you realize how things sort of lead that way. I call this planetary acquisition, because this is a global phenomenon. It's got three pillars, as I said before. It's clandestine, it's intergenerational, and it's global, it's intergenerational. But the last thing I forgot to mention was that it's clandestine, or maybe I did mention it. It's clandestine. It's secret. They don't want anybody to know what they're doing. And that secrecy and global phenomenon those two things really don't bode well. If they were here to help us and to spiritually enhance us and all the rest of that stuff, then we'd know, and they would be telling us, and we'd be happy, and they'd be happy, and we'd be joining together hand in hand dancing.
But we're not.
We're not. They don't want anybody to know what's going on, and in fact, the way you do that is by keeping it known to the abductee themselves, and that's why 95% of abductees don't know that they're abductees. But it's global. It is global. That's the thing. It's not an American phenomenon. It's global, and they are doing this around the world. That means that their resources is unlimited, basically. It also means other things. It answers questions about, are we the first planet ever to be hybridized? That's one question. And the other question is this the first time they've ever hybridized a planet? And there's logical reasons to answer those questions. It's just simple logic. And I just wish that there were more people who could do this work, and come up with their own forms of logic in some way. But to me, when you read it, it's hard to get away from the logic of the book. It just says itself. It commands itself. It's not me making something up. You just know it. We know it's global. We know it's clandestine, and we know it's intergenerational.
That's right. That's right.
And we've known those for years.
And as you said, as we've known for years, the number one prerequisite of you becoming an alien abductee is that one or both of your parents were also taken, which proves the multi-generational.
Right, and that's how we can sort of figure out when it started, when it began, and all the rest of that stuff through the intergenerational aspect of it. There are ways of working on it, but a lot of it is unknown. But once you get past the last quarter of the 19th century or the first quarter of the 20th century, the phenomenon in all its different areas and in all its different incantations, so to speak, just drops off the ledge. There's nothing. We don't see people writing about it in the Enlightenment and in the Renaissance. We don't see people writing about it in the 18th and 19th and 20th century, 18th or 19th centuries, or at least. There's just no evidence at all. So it can't have started thousands of years ago, because if it started thousands of years ago and it's intergenerational, by 1,000 years ago, if it started 2,000 years ago, everybody on Earth would have been an abductee.
That's right. That's right.
You see what I mean? So the logic of it just doesn't work.
Now, before we get to, we have two other listener questions. One international, I'm going to have Johnny ask, and another domestic. I want to pose this to you. In the early 90s, there was a Roper poll that said 1 in 40 people have been abducted. So I know of several researchers who are the highest type you can be. I believe it's called STAR in the MUFON, the response team. And Preston Dent is one of them. Fantastic researcher, over 30 years, I think 33, 34 years, a MUFON investigator. He is currently publishing his 21st book. And when he heard that 1 in 40, he's like, that can't be true. That's just way too many. So he polled everybody around him, and he found it to be true. And it might even possibly be more for those who do not know they've been taken. Because we have to factor that into it. We have to factor that into the equation, that people have had such fear during these abductions that their mind suppressed it into their subconscious. And unless they're dreaming these nightmares and seek help and just stay quiet all the time, then all they do is live their lives with having this strange nightmare and occurrences without explaining it. So if you factor that into the equation, the number could be a lot higher. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Bud Hopkins and I did the Roper poll in 1991, and when we got the results, this was a national survey of 6,000 people with 2,000-person sweeps across the United States, and it was clipboard in hand, as we were told, as opposed to just calling on the phone or anything like that. And so it was a very important poll. Now I wish we'd known more about the abduction phenomenon in 1991, but we got funding and we had to do it right away. So we did the best we could. We could ask 11 questions, and one of the questions was a fake question. If they answered yes to the fake question, they were dropped from the poll, from the survey. And and another question was a question we knew the answer to: have you ever seen a UFO? And not like the crazy questions that are asked today, like have you or anybody you know ever seen a UFO?
Yes.
I've seen. It's ridiculous. So we just said, have you ever seen a UFO? You know, and 7% of the people said they had, yes, which was at that time the lowest amount ever recorded, and therefore probably the most accurate amount in the United States. That has been duplicated over the years. But then we asked you. So when we got the questionnaires, Hopkins and I realized that the number of people who were saying they were being abducted was much too high to go forward with in the public arena. So what we did was we had 10 questions that were meaty questions, so to speak, and we then said that they had to, and we divided the 10 into 5 questions which were not as important, and 5 questions which were of greater importance, and they had to answer yes to 8 of the 5 questions, at least 5 top questions of importance. That meant that you could. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. You had to answer 4 or 5 of the top 5 questions. That meant that if you answered yes to 8 of the questions, it was possible that you were dropped from the poll. And when we did that, we got the number down to 2%. So that made national news.
And like I said, that was a poll from 25 years ago. Things have changed dramatically since then. And those also were the glory days. We had none other than you, Bud Hopkins himself, John Mack, to talk about these things. And unfortunately, we lost John Mack to a drunk driver hit car accident where he was walking, I believe, after a pub in somewhere in England, as well as Bud Hopkins passing of old age. But nonetheless, I think if the poll was done now, we would get answers that would be very different. And now that you know so much more, having 25 years more of research, I would imagine that the questions would be changed, obviously, because if you ask anybody, have you seen an unidentified flying object, or do you know anybody who has seen an unidentified flying object, I rarely get the answer no. Rarely get the answer no. Almost everyone either has seen it or knows somebody who has seen it and can describe what they saw. Now, was it a test plane? We don't know. The point was, it was doing something erratically. It came out of nowhere. It went either straight up to the sky. It had extremely bright lights, or it hovered, which were things that couldn't be done in certain times of the years. For instance, they have the ability to hover and then go to 0 to several thousand miles per hour. Still is something that we cannot do with our known physics. However, we have to look beyond that, and science every year we change it. It's changed. Everything from 150 years ago has been changed. I mean, 550 years ago, everyone thought the world was flat, but that was clearly found to be round, and so on and so forth. So things are constantly changing, and I think there will be a time where people will finally understand. Okay, here's 3 questions. Let's go first all the way to the United Kingdom. Johnny Webb.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, Dr. Jake.
Johnny, you're a little low. If you can get a little higher.
Yeah, I'm in a Mennonite cafe, and they're good enough with the 6 fingers to let me come on here tonight. So it's the best I can do, unfortunately, Dr. J. But as you know, I'm monitoring the questions back in the UK here across the pond. But good evening, Dr. Jacobs. Our first question says, how many of the men in black or army personnel are there in the experiences questions? And it says, is there a possibility that this is a big psyops made by US Army Special Forces to test us all with exotic weapons? And that comes from Justin in Cambridge on England on Facebook.
John, you're going to have to repeat that to me because I didn't quite hear all of it.
Okay, our first question, she asks, how many speak of men in black or army personnel in their experiences?
Yeah, okay, I can certainly answer that part. I have never run into anything even remotely resembling Men in Black. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not logical. It's not sensible. I think this was sort of made up by an early flying saucer researcher. I can't remember whether it was Gray Barker or somebody like that. And it went into popular culture, and once something gets into popular culture, it never seems to go away ever. But I've never found anything like that. Now, in terms of armed services personnel, they are abducted, and people will see people who are taken on board with an Army uniform or an Air Force uniform or whatever it is. It's taken off, and where they take the regular clothes off for all abductees. And but the armed services are not involved with abductions. I've never heard anything like that by anybody. And those are things that I think are I know a lot of people are very much interested in the Army and Air Force MELABs, military abductions and all that. But I've never found anything even remotely resembling that. I'm sorry to say. I mean, it would be interesting if it was true, but I don't have any stake in it. But I've just never found that, not ever, and neither did my colleague Bud Hopkins.
Psychological warfare, it sounds like to me, or a good way to debunk it. Blame it on the ETs if the humans are messing around with us, or blame it on the military that are a rogue group that to avoid the extraterrestrials. There's a lot of disinformation going out there, and people need to be able to discern the difference between the information coming from the actual people who have had contact versus what is being told without, just hearing from, say, the grapevine, for instance.
Yeah.
Very, very important. Okay, here is a fantastic question I think I'm going to ask.
Okay, before you ask that question, let me make something a little bit clearer that I said before. On the Roper Poll questionnaire, they had to answer 4 of the 5 questions at the top of the top 5 questions to make the poll. So that meant that you could do 80%. You could answer 80% of the questions right, 8 questions right, but you still wouldn't make the poll. Sorry if I was unclear about that.
That's okay. I'm glad you made it very clear because it's really important for everybody to know that. Now, let me ask this, because the more you make it out there, obviously it's important. So now we have another question here, but let me go in order first. Okay, I believe it's Ankit or Ankit Singh, San Diego. Is the biology of these aliens so different from humans that Earth viruses and bacteria do not affect them whatsoever?
Yeah, well, that we don't know. We do. Well, let's put it this way: for gray aliens, which I think are created on board for just to do their work, we know that they eat through skin absorption, and they don't breathe, they don't speak except telepathically. They don't have any hair on their bodies. They don't have any genitals, which is a tough one to reproduce, and all they do is what they do. There's no life outside, from what we can tell, for them. They are just workers, and that's it. For insect-like ones, we don't know how they get nourishment. We don't know anything about them at all. Same thing with the reptilian-like ones. We don't know anything about them at all. Zero. But we know more about the gray aliens than anything else because everybody sees gray aliens. Now, these days, people are seeing hybrids all the time. My guess is that the early stage hybrids get nutrition through their skin, and there's a little bit of evidence for that, but enough to tell me that that's what's happening. And by the time they get to late stage, middle stage, or late stage, or human stage, they're eating through their mouths. What they are eating, we don't know. What the nutrient mixture is, we don't know. We don't know who makes the nutrients. We don't know. Once again, it's all backstory. We don't know anything about that. And what was the second part of your question, or was there?
That was it, essentially.
Okay.
It was it's the biology of these aliens so different from humans that Earth viruses and bacteria do not affect them whatsoever.
Well, gray aliens, if any of them ever get sick, we'd never know it. Pretty much they all look alike, and my guess is they're not exactly stamped out of a die, but they might as well be. But we've never seen anything leading to sickness or illness or anything like that amongst aliens. So it's a tough one. But these things, though, are they're, like I said, they're created for a purpose, and that purpose ultimately is all involved with planetary acquisition. And they all have their jobs to do. They all have. They've all been created for that, and they just do it. So illnesses, I've never heard of it, never known it. Yes. Now, every once in a while, a person on board will, an abductee will report that they had a cold or some upper respiratory illness, and when they returned from the abduction, it was gone.
Yes, and it's ironic you mentioned that because Dr. Robert Woods, or Bob Woods, as he goes by, when I had him on this program not too long ago, he talked about pathogens, alien pathogens, that people have suffered from coming in contact with some of these beings without wearing anything, thinking that, for instance, a hurt being that somehow ended up somewhere, or we shot it, and touching their biological fluids or something like that, or just maybe a sick being in itself. The point is he made a good point of how many people have died and have been seriously sick to the point of hospitalization because of these alien pathogens. So I'm glad we brought this up. Let's go to Dan, who's got a question. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, this comes from Rob. Let me see where he's from. In Bremen. I'm not sure where that is. But his question is there any evidence that hints to another instance above those Mantis aliens?
Yeah, the Mantis aliens are the insect-like ones, and people often say they look like praying mantises. We don't know whether there is a higher echelon somewhere else in space that they answer to. That is simply an unknown. It's possible, of course, because what we see is a hierarchy on board. So it's certainly within the realm of conceivability that the insect-like ones, or insectolans as I call them, that they also have higher ups. And so, I mean, there's got to be. It seems to me there has to be some sort of other coordination, but maybe not. We don't know. It's just I can't even comment on it. You know, we just don't know. And the best thing I can say is we don't know.
Now, this comes from Lou Sheehan in Rancho Cucamonga, which is right here in Southern California. He says, if I understand correctly, you'll soon be speaking at a SoCal conference. When, where, when, and what is the topic of your talk? I'm assuming he missed the beginning. We were talking about Zero, so might as well address it for those who caught on the show a little bit late, since we started with that.
Well, you can go ahead and tell them you've got all those dates and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody out there, it's Zero International, and the reason I know this information is because I was instrumental in. I'm on the board of directors putting this event together. It is happening in San Pedro. You can go to Zero International, CERO. Just think Close Encounters Research Organization, CERO, CERO, or zerointernational.com, and click on the events tag under the menu. There you will see the event that's occurring on Saturday, October 1st, with 4 speakers, including Dr. David Jacobs, who is the headliner, along with Debbie Jordan Cobble, who played, I believe, was it Laura or some pseudonym in Bud Hopkins' Intruders. But nonetheless, her real name is Debbie Jordan Cobble. She's been on the show before. If you haven't heard that, we suggest you go to our YouTube channel and take a listen to that, because she has some fantastic stories to talk about. Now, also, there is Mary Rodwell, and of course Yvonne Smith, and Jim Lowe, who's going to be talking about laws with alien abductee rights. And David Jacobs will be speaking for 75 minutes at 10 a.m. So again, just go to zerointernational.com and you will find all the information right there. So now, with that being said, I think we got enough. I know I kept you 40 minutes past the time we advertised this show. So I wanted to say, first of all, let me ask you this. Aside from the hybrids, as well as the grays, which a lot of people argue don't even have souls because they're just created in tubes as worker beings. They're just doing what they're told. That's why they don't really answer very many questions. And then, of course, there seems to be something more in charge on board a craft, usually a taller sort of gray being. There seems to be a lot of gray beings if you hear all the stories right. And then you hear about a lot of people talking about the reptilians, and the scariest that I would see is the praying mantis. Kathleen Martin and Denise Stoner did a really good job when they wrote their book on alien abductions. Their very first one they collaborated with, because Denise Stoner herself is also an abductee, and Thomas Reed, who goes by Tom Reed, drew a picture of one of these praying mantis beings, and they are so tall, the way they have to sit, their legs are sort of like an M, and there's like a sack sitting on, hanging underneath them. And they say that they are so precise with their hands that they are generally the surgeons and are far more loving, affectionate, and intelligent than anything else on the ship. So aside from those three beings that we talked about, is there any other types you could talk about?
Well, there's the reptilians, which have been much has been made about them. I guess it was David Icke who started it or something like that. And they basically do the same work that gray aliens do, and I posit why they're there, and I do it in a logical sense. And so I will not reveal that on your show today, but they're there for a reason, and the reason is logical. And basically do the same things as the gray aliens do. People are frightened of them. They seem to give off an aura of threat, and people don't like them and all this, but they're just workers, like the gray aliens.
Now, we have a couple more questions. I guess I was going to wrap it. We have a couple more, so I'm going to do my best since Johnny is copying and pasting for them to me because, of course, he is not in a good area to use his studio in London and bouncing off of it with an internet signal to connect to the equipment there. But nonetheless, let me try to read this. This comes from Claire in Sunderland, England. When you mention that these experiencers are being prepared for some future event to round up people, what is that they say will be the event or events?
Say that again. I'm not sure. When there's an event around, say that again.
When you mention that some of these experiencers are being prepared for some future event to round up people.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay. People started telling me this many years ago, that there's something in their minds that they can't quite get out. They think that something is happening, and my sense, when I first started doing this was what they're thinking about is that they're abductees. They don't, that's they're being abducted. That's what's deep in their mind somewhere. But in fact, that is not the case. Abductees now are being groomed to, as I said at the very beginning of the talk, are being groomed to help the aliens once the aliens appear here, apparently in greater masses. And one of the earliest things that I heard, and I still hear it, is they are told that when the time comes, now who knows when that is, they will be required to stand on a street corner, and there will be people who are panicked. There'll be a mob of humans who are panicked, and your job is to say, just keep moving this way, everything is fine, everything is okay. You can't. I've had a whole bunch of people tell me this totally insane story, not knowing that anybody else has ever said that to me, But in fact, obviously, it's not insane. It suggests the awfulness of the future, perhaps. And I had one case. Now, there's just one case where a person said that people were running down a street, and they were running down a street towards a waiting UFO. Whether that is confabulation from her or whether that is true, I don't know. I only heard it once. But standing on the street and using crowd control measures of some sort as panicked mobs of people run, gee, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Some reason or another, I don't know what it is. Something about it I just don't like. So, and other people have been, as I said earlier on, they've been they're being groomed to act like gray aliens, to do the jobs of gray aliens, and I give a couple of examples of that actually in the book. That are fairly harrowing, I must say, and I still keep hearing that from people that they'll be staring at the people's eyes and finding out what's going on in their minds and controlling people with their minds, controlling other humans, and things like that. And so they do have people for the future. Now, my sense is they have a rolling stock of humans, because humans get hit by trucks, they get cancer and die, they get old and die, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a rolling stock of humans who will be used for when the time comes, whenever it is, globally. Once again, this is not an American phenomenon.
Absolutely, and that's what makes it very important. And that's why I love John Mack's documentary of going to Zimbabwe and speaking with those children. And I don't know who it is that's doing a new movie where they're, or it's been released already that I haven't seen, where they went and tracked down the children from the Zimbabwe incident that are now adults. So I'm really excited to hear what they have to say and what they still remember, or what they are saying now the same as what they are said then, or is it changed a little bit now that they've learned so much about these incidents? Anyhow, I want to just make one thing clear. That question you got from Bremen, we just found out it was from Germany, Bremen, Germany, and I don't see the name of the person, but that's what it was. It was from Bremen, Germany. Yes, that's what it is. So it said it was asked and answered. So nonetheless, we got it. So, Dr. David Jacobs, we've kept you on for an hour and 45 minutes plus pre-show. So let me tell everybody again. Remember, don't forget, he's speaking on October 1st at SeroInternational.com. You could check out all the information, or, of course, click on the hot link. You will also get a chance to see all his books by going to the Books and Videos tab on our website, which is Dr. J Radio Live, the same name of the show. When you click on that, all you have to do is scroll down to David Jacobs. It'll take you to his author's page. Remember, the only phrase you have to remember is DRJ Radio Live. That is the same name from everything from Facebook, Skype, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, Google+, where we archive our videos on YouTube, all the accounts, Pinterest, Slack, Snapchat, everything. It's DRJ Radio Live. So with that being said, Dr. David Jacobs, is there any final statement you would like to give before we...
Well, not really. There's not a whole. The problem here is there's not a whole lot we can do about this subject. We can sit back and watch. That's about it. Even if the government knew, and if the government scientists were working on it, I still think that the technology is much too great to be effective. To have an effective and what's the word I'm looking for? Defense against, I guess. So I rue the future. I used to look forward to the future and all that. Now I'm just not so happy about it. And I wish that people had not been telling me these things. I don't want to hear these things. You know what I mean? I don't have anything at stake in this other than trying to find out exactly what's happening.
The truth. That's right.
The truth. That's it. Exactly. And so But there it is, and I know that a lot of people don't like what I've said, but what I've said is what other people have told me, So there.
That is right, and that is why I'm so glad you've continued on your work, even in your retirement after, of course, being Professor Emeritus at Temple University, that you still publish this book. That, remember everybody, knowledge is power. Even though we can't do anything about it, what we can do is be aware. And remember, because knowledge is power, that is your skill set. Disclosure is not going to happen by a mainstream president coming out and talking about what is going on. Because just as David Jacobs said, and I truly believe, they probably don't really even fully understand the situation. And the more they do understand, the more they get scared. So they're not going to tell it. So what you need to do is take this knowledge, read Walking Amongst Us and his other 3 books, and spread the word. Become aware, because disclosure will come with you. So remember, disclosure is in your hands. And like I said, just click on the books and videos tabs on our website, drjradiolive.com. A quick note from our sponsors. And first of all, let me talk about our syndicated networks. We do have Late Night in the Midlands carrying our show, as well as PSN, both in the Midwest and the East Coast. Across the Atlantic Pond in the UK, we have Deprogram Radio Network also carrying this show, not to mention the terrestrial stations, iTunes, and all the other tunein.com and every other internet site you could think of that has some sort of way to listen. It's out there. This show is global, and we are glad that you are all participating in it. Of course, we have a large team of people I'd like to thank. I only have time to think of a few people. Of course, we have Johnny Webb in London, but who's not in London at the moment. He's touring the States currently in, of course, Pennsylvania, SoCal. Dan watching for our mainstream chat room, while Johnny Webb was watching our international chat rooms, plural. Then we have Tom Schaefer in Florida doing our website and our sound engineering and producing a live, I guess you could say, screens or a show, a live show for you as you. So if you're watching this on an MP4 as opposed to listening it on regular terrestrial radio, if you're watching it on YouTube, you actually are seeing pictures of Dr. Jacobs, his books, pictures of amazing UFOs that were given to us by Jaime Maussan, and possibly what we see of extraterrestrials. Unfortunately, we can't vet the extraterrestrial pictures, but what we can do is the people who have been taken, such as Nathan and Adam Ambrose, who were on not too long ago, who drew some fantastic pictures of their experiences. Those are available for everybody to see. So with that being said, for those of you who I didn't get a chance to thank, also Lou Sheehan, our researcher, who asked one of the questions, I gotta say, this is Dr. J, and we are